Incremental greetings. Today I want to focus on rating recall. You know, when you do a repetition on an item, you show the answer, then you have to grade how well. You have to grade to assess how well was that recall. And turns out that in SuperMemo it's not as easy as pass and fail, right? You have up to 5 options, spoiler alert, 6, and so on. So in this video, I'm going to share where you should use, if you really should, use its rating when it's going to be useful, and if actually you should care or not. And in each case, the pros and cons. There's no right and wrong. There's pros and cons of every possible scenario. Then what happens or how it will affect the algorithm in the short and long term, and my own proposal, a convention that I suggest for you. Keep in mind, this video will have chapters, so if something doesn't apply to you, feel free to skip the chapter. I'm here to help you, not to waste your time. Cool. So let's start. First, actually, there are not 5. Okay. So you have the question, you show the answer, you have either the emoji with different faces, or here it's easier here to get it, that you have just the name. That, okay, great, good, pass, fail, and bad. Well, actually, you have yet another one, that is the blackout, and it's the 0. And in this case, here you go, is one example, just to let you know, that in SuperMemo there are actually 6 different ratings, not 5, as some people think. And there are 3 for each. 3 successful, 3 for 5, and 3 failures, 0, 1, and 2. So, at the end of the day, it's just pass and fail, yes, but within each you have categories, 3. So, to answer the first question, should I use all 5 or 6 possible ratings? No. You can perfectly use SuperMemo without using all of the options. And you can really stretch it to only use 2. 1 for pass, 1 for fail, and that's it. Being, for instance, 1 and 3, or 2 and 4, or 2 and 5, or 1 and 5, all of the possible combinations. So now let me answer, where should you use its rating? Okay, so I will answer this. Let me simulate the repetition. Okay. If you activate the hints here, you will have a description. Little or no recall. And fail is wrong response with some lazy recall. That, oh yeah, I had some vague idea, not enough to answer the question, but oh yeah, something was there. And bad is that, well, it's like nothing was there, that absolutely no idea, right? So you can make this distinction. And for the pass grades, actually the number 3 is actually not good, it's pass. Then you have which is rather correct response recalled with substantial effort. I was surprised when I read 3 years ago this description that, oh, I thought the number 3, which is the default when you press spacebar, was equivalent to the good, right? The number 3 in Anki. If you use Anki, you have, again, hard, good, and easy. So I thought that this was the good. Turns out, no, it's not. Then you have good, which is the correct response, and if you really recall the answer, it's the one you should go, theoretically. And then you have the great, that is more or less the easy in Anki, and it's when it's external response given without hesitation, that, oh, I know this by heart. Effortless recall. Cool. But turns out that making all of these decisions, it's fatiguing. There is something called decision bias. Yes, and there's also the decision fatigue. So if I do a lot of items in SuperMemo, I don't read that much. I don't do that many. I don't interleave that many topics, and I do more items than topics. What will happen is that I will create fatigue in the decision that, oh, no, I'm kind of tired of, oh, what is this? Is this fail? Wait, did I recall that good? No, I'm not precise enough. I'm not consistent enough with what I rated before. So for consistency, oh, yeah, that will be good, not the past. No. And first, you invest more time making the decision. You have a thought process making the decision. This is taxing. The question is this worth it for the algorithm for the sake of fine-tuning the next interval calculation? So you want to optimize your retention rate. Well. I have my reservations for that question. I will come to that later. Because there's something more important. And it's by design in SuperMemo algorithm, especially the reason and quote-unquote reason, SuperMemo SM18, which was released 5 years ago. Not the SuperMemo version, the version of the algorithm that is being implemented. So having that in mind is that, well, the recent versions of the algorithms doesn't weight that much the user input in the category. What do I mean by that? That what's important if it's a failure or it's a pass. If that failure was a 0, a 1, or 2, that doesn't make much of a difference for SuperMemo algorithm. It's more a qualitative approach for the user. So for you it will be meaningful, that was a 5 out of 3, But at the end of the day, it's just a tiny fraction of what affects the next calculation. The priority of the element will outweigh the rating. Back in the day, when I started with SuperMemo, I did some experiments. I think I have the video. Okay, so in 2021, I did 2 videos on that, on my own experiments. If I rate as 3, 4, or 5, how affects the algorithm? Feel free to check those out if you want. But I will just get to the very basic finding. You will see this here, that there's a 3-way overlap. What does that mean? That I thought that yes, at some degree, the rating number 3 and 4, they will overlap at some point. That means that the same interval can be achieved with either 3 or 4. Makes sense. But turns out that 5 also overlaps. So let's say, to simplify, that I have an item which the next interval can be as minimum as 100 days and as maximum, let's say, 200, and I can get 150, to say something. So I can get this, if I press 3, I rate it as 3, or 4, or even 5. Yeah, what happened that the region of 5, let's say, it's from 150 and 200. The 4 from 120 and 180. And the 3 from 100 and 150. So more or less they have the same scope, 50% coverage, but it's enough that they overlap at some point. So keep that in mind. That is not like in Anki, that up to Anki 2.1, before the 23.10 was released, then now you have the FSRS algorithm. So what happened? You had the easiness, and that's it. So if you selected the easy, you get an increase, a 0.15 increase in the easiness. So you get a higher next interval. And if you fail, which is called again in Anki, it will be bad, fail, or blackout in SuperMemo. What happens is that it decreases 0.15 the easiness. So therefore, all of the next intervals will be affected. Not just the next one. All of the consequent intervals will be also affected because the easiness is different. So when it multiplies every time, it will have from a lower starting point from the next repetition after the lapse, right? So without going into the specifics, yes, it makes a difference in the algorithm, but it's so low in SuperMemo 19 or 18, which, by the way, use the same exact algorithm, you can just neglect it. It's not worth it. The time you will invest fine-tuning your ratings versus the time you will save doing slightly less repetitions because the interval will be slightly more stretched. It's not worth it. So that's an opinion, because I don't have the raw data to prove this. Is that at the end of the day, even if it's not optimal, it's close to the optimal, but not the optimal. It's enough, good enough. And since you get the time, you take a heuristics decision. Even if you lapse and relapse again, you will end up doing less. You will end up committing less time. Perhaps more repetition. Yes, absolutely, you'll do more repetitions. But the repetitions will take a shorter time because of the decision time will be shorter. So now at the end of the day, you will spend less time. So here's my suggestion. That's the next chapter. So here's my suggestion when how rating as pass or fail affects the algorithm. In the sense, this question is in the sense that, okay, what if I don't ever use the other options? I only use 2 and 4. Well, another spoiler alert. These already exist in SuperMemo. If you use templates, I don't have them here. Okay, no worries. I will do it by memory. You have the multiple choice question, the spelling template, and some others, I think, that you don't actually require to grade 1, 2, 3, or 5. You just write the text down in the spelling template, and if it's correct, it grades as 4, number 4. And if you fail, the text differs, it grades as 2, which is a failure. Here you go. What happens is a binary decision. There are only 2 possible grades, 2 and 4. SuperMemo has been doing this already for decades. So yes, you can use SuperMemo with only 2 ratings, as long as the ratings are 1 for failure and 1 for pass. Same for the multiple choice question. If you choose the right one, it will be 4. If you choose a distractor, you will get to number 2. Same conclusion. So yes, feel free if you want to just use 2 ratings. Even though, if you really dig into SuperMemo, and especially if you really use it for incremental reading, I will suggest to go slightly further, stick an heuristic approach, that, hey, perhaps I can use the other ratings as marking me something to communicate to my future self. That, hey, I know that by convention, I won't be using 5 unless I do something of interest, right? I'm signaling something. And that's actually what I do. By the way, in my own case, I don't use number 4 as a default. I use number 3, even if it's hazy recall. And there's one big reason for it. Because I'm lazy and I just use spacebar. I don't decide the number, oh, let me go, oh yeah, it's this one, this key and so on. No, I just use the spacebar for convenience, which maps to number 3. This will be only make a difference if you use the final drill. If you use the final drill, then hey, that makes a big difference. Why? Because in the final drill, everything up to 3, including number 3, which is successful, goes to the final drill. So in case you want to use the final drill, then default to the number 4, because then everything that is successful won't appear in the final drill, unless you really want to. That, oh no, for me I'm strict, and for me hazy recall is not good enough. Therefore, I will be using the final drill. If that's your case, I will extremely highly suggest to use auto hotkey, because it's as easy as remapping the key. So it will detect where you at. I could do this script in the future if you request it. It will detect in which window you are in, and in case it's this window, and in this context, remap space to number 3. Why the context is important? Because if the focus is in the element, the spacebar is for editing the text. So instead of white spaces, I will be getting number 3s, right? So you will really need to target the context. So in that case, you can be as lazy as you want, because regardless of where am I at, I will just use spacebar. But internally in SuperMemo, it will be getting number 3s. Cool. Then, regardless if you use the final drill or not, you're gonna still have something left. Number 5 and 1. The difference in 1 and 2, right? And I reserve this not by more or less heuristically the quality of the recall, but also the reason behind the failure. So I have a convention. And this is what I meant by the use case convention, which I suggest you can use. You can do something similar and adjust it to your case. So for me, when I failed an item, but I failed it because, wow, that was the answer, that I failed to recall the answer because of the formulation of the item. That, oh, I thought it was something else. Or it was too vague, is what I'm trying to ask here, what I'm trying to recall, right? In that case, I will use number 2. And always number 2. It's reserved, this failure, as number 2. So what happens? When I see an item, oh yeah, it's this answer. Oh shit, it's not. What happened here? Okay, so here we have a very dummy example. I have a question, oh yeah, I recall the answer. And whoops, it's potato. It's a different answer I was expecting, right? So in that case, because I had interference with another element, that perhaps another element that happens to be an item, and I cannot locate it, or I even didn't look for that item, but I know that in my brain there's an interference. I don't care if it's in SuperMemo or not, that interference in items. Perhaps it's in Anki or in any other place, or it's not even in any software, but it's in my brain. So therefore, what I will do is number 1. But not because of the recall was little or no recall. Perhaps I had recall, more than when I read number 2. But the recall was wrong, was misleading. So in that case, I use the rating as some sort, in a very ample aspect of interpretation, would be a tag. I'm tagging the reason of the failure. So next time that I go to my stats, well, bad example because I have to blank out. Okay, so here's one example. That's a topic. That's an item, 5 years interval. The first one I got that was lapsed. Nothing particular. So in this case, I lapsed at the very beginning of the repetitions, but the point is the same. So I don't think that back in the day I had this convention that was from August, was very close to the beginning. So at some point you can do this. Hey, if that was happened to be a 2, I know for sure it was just a regular lapse or because of the phrasing, the formulation, and so on. But if it was because, oh wow, I have an interference now in memory that perhaps is later after successful recalls, then when I see 1, it's, oh yeah, now I know why. So that's one example that I use, and feel free to actually use the opposite. So for me, reformulation is 2 and interference is 1, but for me it's more like severe, the reason. Feel free to exchange it or use your own criteria. As long as it's a failure, nothing to worry about. And if you don't want to, you just want plain and simple pass and fail, pass and fail, pass and fail. If you want, you can use number 2 and 4. That will be more consistent, especially if you use multiple choice questions or a spelling template, that you will be getting 2 and 4, 2 and 4. So you keep the same 2 and 4. So the entire collection is just 2 and 4. Even though, what happens with one of the last detail is, well, what happens now if I see this very same video and now I change my approach? Yeah, it's not the same if I start fresh with almost no data from the user and I do this approach of just pass and fail. But what happens if I have been doing, I don't know, thousands of repetitions and now I decide to just do pass and fail? Or the opposite, I have been doing pass and fail and now I do all of the options. Nothing to worry about. It won't change overnight, but eventually SuperMemo will adjust. So when you see items again, the next repetition again, or different items of the same topic, the same source, same concept, and so on, it will adjust. You won't see much of a difference. It will be slightly more heuristic. This fine-tuning, you will, I don't know, to say something, 5%. But this 5% you will just do the repetitions again, and this will take less time than all of the time you have spent deciding, oh, that's a 4, that's a 5, and so on. I hope I covered everything, more or less. Feel free to ask or voice your opinion in the comments, and see you incrementally.